Okay, so this is a lecture. I think I'll make it the whole lecture, lecture number 14, and it's on applying Kant. And I think the Descartes thing too. So it won't be that long a lecture, but I think in your post, it would be nice, or I would like to require you to think of your own examples of how this mechanistic worldview is impacting our lives and our choices and every aspect. To what extent are you being asked to be like an extension of a computer, to think like a computer, to get pulled into these categories that are abstracted? They're objective and detached observer. You're becoming a detached observer of your own life, or you're being asked to repress and deny your emotions, your inclinations, and being told to just follow the moral law or just um, follow the truth wherever it goes, even though it's harmful or it hurts or whatever. So um, the idea is that later on, Capra will talk about the kind of damage to humanity that the Protestant work ethic has brought on. And the Protestant work ethic is Kantian. You repress your emotions and direct all of that energy to making money, being successful, but you're supposed to also be very frugal. And so in the Protestant work ethic, people did give money away, right? Um, that was the obligation of the nobility. That was continuing that old tradition, but this time from the point of view of Western, especially American Protestants. Um, and they exploited the natural world and they got rich, but they were calculating, they were using their reason. And we'll check out Locke. Locke has the view of God gave us the earth for our use and comfort. But Kant was just acting on the moral law, treat yourself as a rational being, but it was applied, it's absolutely good for you to cultivate your talent for making a product and selling it, and then being frugal, don't give in to inclinations, and then donate, right? That was that principle of cultivating a talent. You also, you're generous, right? Because you cannot will not to be generous. So it's all very rational. It's all based on absolute principles. If you do make a lot of money, it's a moral law not to give in to your own inclinations, but to give it to people who need it, and then they themselves can become successful and they live a frugal life and they give their extra away. So that was kind of, the idea, I think, in America. That was one way of understanding how to get the country to work. There was lots of ways. Another way was that they gave money to start small liberal arts colleges like Lyon College. And that was to be able to educate people, to unite reason and faith. And when they do that, of course, it's God's will for you to learn science and then use that science to exploit nature and become prosperous and then generous. Okay. So, so that's another example of the Protestant work ethic. Kant is Protestant. The Enlightenment thinkers were Newtonian, right? The rationalists like Descartes and Kant believed in God, but it was not the God of Aristotle, and it was not the God of the Bible, Old Testament or the New Testament. It was the Newtonian God as the clockmaker that wound up the mechanistic system. It was a God that for Descartes was an innate idea, but for Kant was that reason would draw an inference, right? It's indirect proof. But a reasonable person would believe that there was a God and would believe in um, the soul and immortality, and you would be rewarded for your generosity or punished for your self-indulgence and failure to be generous. Um, okay, you would be punished for laziness, all that other stuff. So let me look at some of the applications, and then you can think of, right now we have AI, the whole tech thing, all the different branches of it, artificial intelligence. There's a school called functionalism. There's a lot of branches of it, but it all started out here with the rationalists, the modern rationalists, and then all of it, I think it's going to switch really quickly. Like in China, this is not true. The STEM disciplines are tied to sustainable living, to creating a sustainable future. So the president of China just gave his end of the year speech, and he's talking about the progress that China's making. He just talks about sustainability. That just is a number one priority, is that their economic growth is connected to sustainability. Americans still haven't caught on to that, but I think they will soon. It's just that they definitely have not right now. Donald Trump Project 2025, one of its goals was to destroy all environmental laws. And the judges on our Supreme Court now have a history of destroying environmental laws. And that's because our founding fathers had no environmental laws. You're supposed to exploit nature and give it value. And you have a right to do that. You have a responsibility to do that. God wants you to do that. And you can give away your extra money, but it's still a fossil fuel economy and you still don't worry about sustainability. All right. So after I talk about these applications in your posts, I want you to feel free to, and I would sure like to find out about your own examples of how the growth of technology and computers and all that has affected your life and how you think it affects the culture. Of course, social media was one. We've already read about a number of them, or at least a few. Social media, definitely. Um, so this is a shorter lecture, but hopefully some creativity on your part for how to apply it. So the first one is about our founders. And were they really Christians? All right, we really have to go there. They were intellectuals, I'm sorry. And they were, the ones who were rationalists were deists in the Kantian sense. And Descartes, I mean, it's obvious if you study that. But there are just, the vast majority of Americans know nothing about the intellectual history behind the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. Even little things. I mean, this is not a big deal. It's a lecture in a class. It's not, it's just that they don't know. I even think there are teachers who profess to believe in the good old days, uh, the founders, and just don't know, don't care, or deny that our founders were free thinkers and they brought in free thinkers. You could have any religious position you wanted. Even if the traditionalists would call it atheists, they didn't care. And many of them, I would say all of them, were non-traditional in their understanding of God and the soul and immortality. They don't, Kant and Descartes do not talk about the Trinity or the incarnation. Jesus is God. I don't think so. That's not science, but that doesn't mean they don't believe in immortality of the soul and reward and punishment and all that. They just don't bring in a uniquely Christian ideology. Our founders liked Confucius Analects because they liked the virtues. Um, Thomas Jefferson had a Quran. So they were very broad-minded in their understanding of God, the soul, and immortality. Now, this article is sort of much more concerned with trying to prove that the founders were actually Christian or whether they were or not, which, oh well, I mean, it's important to know this. So Episcopalians were still based on Aristotelian, but of course they're not Catholics. They're not the most traditional. None of them are really the most traditional, which was Catholic. So Episcopalians came up with something that synthesized the Catholic and Protestant to make peace in England. Congregationalists, all of these people could be modern deists pretty easily. Okay, there was one Catholic, there were some that were explicitly deist, they said it publicly. All right, so they believed in this benevolent creator God. Religion was important. Kant and Descartes would not think of God as benevolent because that's an emotion, right? But they thought there was a first principle, a force that was the origin of the universe, and that they called that God. So, so this article is about the varying types of beliefs. And again, this guy is trying to, get data together to try and infer, are they really, legitimate believers or what? And my opinion is just, they liked Kant, they liked Descartes, some of them liked Locke, some of them liked Mill, but, and if you like that, if you have a Declaration of Independence that's basically built on Enlightenment concepts, you would believe in some kind of first principle, some kind of originating creator, but you wouldn't accept the Trinity or a whole lot of stuff like that because it's anti-rational. God doesn't come in the flesh. That's violates reason. It's supposed to violate reason. So some of those doctrines are deliberately inciting you to have to choose between reason and faith. And Kant does not choose between belief in God and reason. And Descartes does not, okay? And neither does Locke. So, okay, so that article is about standard, orthodox belief in God or religion versus the Enlightenment, the kind of belief in God that the rationalists had. All right. This is about how the Kantian view can go wrong. So Kant talks about, and we already know just from the way you already can tell if you don't have to read an article on it, that Aristotle's practical wisdom, the idea of a person of practical wisdom, was used by the privileged class to justify inheriting wealth and privilege. And they weren't. It wasn't justified. They didn't earn their position. They inherited it. And they would just say, yes, but our parents taught us practical wisdom because they had this authority and they showed us how to use it. And Aristotle would say that's bunk, Aristotle didn't want an entrenched wealthy class. He wanted a big inheritance tax. He wanted every kid to have to find their way in the world. And then he wanted taxing the rich. You don't seek out your calling so you can get rich. That should not be your goal. And if greed becomes the goal, especially of the people with talent, you're going to lose a stable society. And you're definitely going to lose a free society. Okay. So Aristotle got corrupted. Now I'm going to explain how Kant got corrupted, right? So in World War II, the problem was, well, all these Enlightenment ideals ended up not working out. And they ended up leading to the invention of gas, poison gas, and more deaths than ever because of the technology. And so it was really a blow to the Enlightenment thinkers. They really did think they were going to create a brave new world. Kant was going to have this system of moral laws. Locke was going to have this system of scientific proof, holding a politician accountable for evidence-based criticism. John Mill wanted to have social engineering. Right, it was all going to be different. And then World War I, we have the same fear, this fear of the other, and an arms race, and you name it. So at the end of World War I, unfortunately, again, the classics will warn you, don't take revenge. That's what the Athenians did to the Spartans. The Sparta surrendered unconditionally, but the Athenians made a treaty that the Spartans would not accept. So they rearmed, and then they ended up winning. So the lesson there is make treaties that work. Diplomacy is way better than war. War just creates problems. Don't try to drive another country into the ground so that they will never rise again. Impossible. Enable other countries to flourish, and you can have a lasting peace. Oh boy, they did not pay attention to that lesson. And so the Germans did regroup, and they fought long and hard. So this is about how Kant was honored in Germany, right? He was a major, major philosophical impact. Because it was related to science, it was also Protestant, it was deist, it was really everything the progressives wanted. They probably all weren't Kantian, but Kant definitely had an influence. Now, what kind of influence was it? And this is a book that talks about the Holocaust, right? How is it that the Germans, who were the tech guys, they were really good at technology. They were very advanced intellectually. They had Bach. They had this incredible cultural tradition. So what happened, right? How did they end up with Hitler, with the Holocaust? And so she's asking that question. What was going on? And she talks about child rearing practices in Germany. So how were the people who conducted the Holocaust, how were they raised as kids, right? How did they get to be so heartless? And so this is her story. She found out how Heinrich Hitler was raised. And it's kind of spooky and it's kind of predictable. So let me see if I can get it so that you can read both pages. Okay. So she says that she found some information about Heinrich Himmler. He was the sort of orchestrator of the Holocaust. He's the one that got the trains running in time. He's the one that organized. Okay, so When he was 11, he's 10 years old. His father ran a school, a gymnasium, it was called the school, and he just completed elementary school. His father tells him his childhood is over now, right? Now the grades he earns will determine his prospects for the future. He has to take himself serious, okay? His father is a schoolmaster. He provides the boy with a pen and ink, okay? He's named, okay? All right, let's see. Heinrich is told to write in his diary every day. He has to write the first entry. He writes the first entry to show the boy how it is to be done, right? So Heinrich is supposed to write down every emotion he has, right? So this is, if you believe that there's one and only one motive, and you should, get rid of all your inclinations. All right, well, that's what Father Mr. Himmler wants Heinrich to learn to do. Re-examine all of his emotions through the light of reason. Um, he adds the words, Gebhard adds the words, first swim to his son's entry. 30th wedding anniversary of my dear parents. And then there's several entries. He lists each of 37 times he takes a swim. He does not write his feelings. He never writes about his feelings or his dreams, right? Nothing that uses the imagination. It's just facts, right? Just facts. Here's another one. Oh, I guess that. So she says, I've been searching through for what precisely I cannot say. Something still hidden in the direction of Himmler's life. She's been in Berlin and Munich on this search. She's trying to find some fragments from his diary to figure out how he got formed, what was going on. She looks at a picture of his family. You have difficulty penetrating the heavy mask that Gebhard and his family wore, difficulty piercing through to the creatures behind it. It must not have been easy to create this mask. One detects the dimensions of the struggle in the advice of, here's German child rearing experts. This is what they tell their parents, how they tell them to treat their kids. Okay, what do they say? They say, crush the will, right? Establish dominance, permit no disobedience, suppress everything in the child. All right, so this is that idea that you follow your duty apart from inclination. This is taking it to a huge extreme, right? One of the most famous child rearing experts. At first glance, the pictures about how to treat your children, they recall images of torture, but instead they're pictures of children whose posture or behavior is being corrected. A brace up the spine, a belt tied to a waist, and the hair at the back of the neck, so the child will be discouraged from slumping. A metal plate at the edge of a desk, keeping the child from curling over her work. A child tied to a bed to prevent poor sleeping posture or masturbation. And there are other methods recommended in the text. An enema before bedtime, immersed in ice cold water up to the hips before sleep. The nightmare images of children child rearing practices call to mind catastrophic events in recent German history. This psychoanalyst, what could make a person conceive the plan of gassing millions of human beings to death, right? How can you? And she traces it back to childhood. Well, um, this is how they were taught to raise their kids. These are the kids that were raised. So it's just, there was a culture, right? Every life is influenced by the culture, the ethos. And the ethos was amazingly bad. To most of existence, there's an inner and an outer world. What's inside shapes what appears, right? So our emotions affect how we react to our environment. Same with human consciousness. Um, the mind rarely has a simple connection to the inner life. At a certain age, we begin to define ourselves, to choose an image of who we are. Okay, one cannot see this process occur in the language of Heinrich's diaries. His character is, there's no record of rage or events that inspire rage. There's no emotion, okay? There's one other, yeah, okay. The child, this is one of the most popular childhood experts. He advised the child should be permeated by the impossibility of locking something in his heart. The doctor who gave this advice had a son who was hospitalized for disabling schizophrenia. Another of his children committed suicide. This was not taken as a warning against this approach. His methods of educating children were so much a part of the canon of everyday life, the ethos in Germany. They were introduced into the state school system. That this philosophy was taught in school gives me an interior view of the catastrophe to follow. It adds a certain dimension to my image of these events. To know that a nation of citizens learned that no part of themselves could be safe from the scrutiny of authority, nothing locked in the heart. At the same time, to discover that the head of the secret police of this nation was the son of a schoolmaster. It was this man, after all, Heinrich Himmler, who was later to say, protective custody. Speaking of the mass arrests of Jews, protective custody is an act of care. All right. So that there's another example of Heinrich Himmler when it was in the Nuremberg trials, and he's defending himself. And he says that every decision he made, he would he would ask himself, what can I will to be a universal law of what the Führer would want, right? So instead of what a priori reason would require, he substitutes what Hitler would require. Act on the basis of whatever you think the Führer would want. Which is, of course, not fair to Kant, but it is this idea, if you repress children's happiness too much. And so that goes back to our whole discussion of Aristotle on happiness. It's that you raise kids to take pleasure in doing the right thing, and having friends that do the right thing, and they take pleasure in doing the right thing. And that's where Kant, forget pleasures, just do your duty. Well, now you know that in America, happiness requires serotonin, long-term goals, but it has gotten corrupted into pleasure, dopamine, impulsivity, right? And so social media has exploited that, making you feel happy if you have a lot of friends. The food system has done that to you. The TV, the let's see. Oh yeah, the psychologists that are teaching social engineering so that we have neural marketing, so that what makes you happy is that you can make a lot of money. And you do that by exploiting people's emotions and getting them to think pleasure is happiness. So definitely, like we've got these two extremes going. One of them is pleasure is happiness, immediate impulsivity. The other one is deny all pleasures, right? And of course, um, I think Hacking an American Mind would say that basically those kids were driven by fear, like cortisol. Don't you dare feel anything, right? And you just get so you've numbed yourself to it. It goes from fear to just getting used to it, which is pretty scary. But then we have how is the high-tech world, how are the rationalists affecting our society now? And this is one example, but there's so many at this point. I love to hear my students' examples. They so so here's the Apple Watch, right? And so this was quite a while ago. This was 12 years ago or something, 2013. And so this guy is getting kind of paranoid about Apple Watches and Google Glasses, and we're just making ourselves an extension of a machine, um, cyborg, right? How cyborg are we willing to go? So, I mean, has been an issue. This was before Facebook had become much of an issue. I mean, it was there, but it wasn't having the impact it has now, and people aren't calling it out the way they used to. I mean, people are calling it out. They didn't used to call it out. There didn't used to be as much data about the effects of it. But here's just to give you an early example of this. What is going to be the relationship between mind and body? And there is this basic intuition that this the tech world should have its limits, right? There's only so much you should allow technology into your life to affect your emotions. There's only so much of your life you want to dedicate to this disembodied kind of thinking. But it's an issue. It's something we live with. And at this point, there is that every single person has to deal with that. And then also collectively, to what extent do we dedicate technology to sustainability? And to what extent do we persist in our fossil fuels? And to what extent do we just think a free market, everybody will figure it out? And when we get to survival mode and the nature is literally falling apart, people will suddenly, the light will dawn and there will be all sorts of new products. I I think I don't think we should wait that long, although we already have waited. So every day that we delay is a problem, but collectively there's going to have to be some change. And Peter Thiel might be on that, might do it, but not at the moment. So I hope you can come up with some good examples. And I look forward to reading about them in your posts.